I really like serving people and helping people and helping people improve their lives in any way, shape or form, I guess. So for right now, for me, if I can help somebody in my day, then that makes me feel good. It brings me joy to spend time with my family. I do this thing, I did a parenting course recently, an online parenting course on how to do positive parenting, and they suggest doing quality time with your kids, so 10 to 15 minutes a day. And so before my kids go off to school, we do a 15-minute, what we call quality time. I'll have one of my children and my husband takes the other one, then we switch over and we do something that they like to do. So
You're listening to the Money and Meaning podcast, where we chronicle the search for meaning over money. I'm your host, Kanae Porter, National Certified Counselor and the world's #1 financial hypnotherapist. This podcast is the mission-driven CEO's guide to wealth without burnout, guilt, or greed. So let's get into today's show.
In business, you will have to pivot at some point. And many businesses experienced this in 2020 during the pandemic. This episode that I'm about to replay for you right now was important to me because this particular CEO, Kimberly Ramsey, she needed to pivot very early in her business. As a matter of fact, she had to choose between two tracks, and she could have followed her heart, but she decided to follow the data in this instance. And that's what made me fall in love with this, because in our work with CEOs and their teams, a lot of times what's in a CEO's heart is not what shows up on the paper. Even what's in the CEO's head is not what shows up in the numbers. And the numbers, they tell the truth. It's just right there. And every part of your business should have a number in some way, shape, or form. And I can explain that later in other episodes. And if you're in our program, you'll learn that. But for those of you who read your analytics, you're collecting data and you're analyzing that data, and hopefully you're using that data to make decisions. And that is what Kimberly had to do when she was building her business. And although she had two choices, eventually, because she followed the numbers, she was able to become successful enough to pull that second idea back into her life. So she started out with the money, and then she went into the meaning. And she found that following the money also brought her meaning. She has a very meaningful business, and you'll hear more about it as you listen to this episode. But as you listen, I want you to think about when you yourself maybe had to make a decision between going left and going right in your business and what that did for you. Because some of us, we don't follow the data. We go in the direction of we think we know, even though the numbers are telling us differently, or we don't even look at the data. I have so many CEOs that I've worked with that are not looking at the data, and they're not listening to their team, and they don't have wise counsel. And maybe they're doing things the old way. Yeah, my Gen Xer and especially my baby boomer CEOs, but my Gen Xer CEOs can be really stuck in their program too. Now, what I love about working with millennials, especially, I don't work with as many millennial CEOs as I do millennial teams. And the great thing about working with millennial teams is that they are open to the easy route. A lot of times the Gen Xers and the baby boomers, they have to take the hard road, and they don't listen to wise counsel. Now, I'll tell you, the millennial is going to have to know why they're doing it this way. And they need to do things in real time. They don't want to know about future events. They really know about, what do I need right now in this moment? They are very in this moment. And I love that about them. But it can really irritate a Gen Xer or a baby boomer often. This episode that you're about to listen to might help you do as a business owner is to make tough decisions early. Yeah. Yeah, right. You sometimes you make a tough decision, but by the time you make it, you've been through so much, right? You didn't listen to the pebble, you didn't listen to the brick, you didn't listen to the boulder. You had to wait for the whole brick house or whatever wall to fall on your head before you made that tough decision. But I think when you listen to this episode, you'll get what you'll connect with Kimberly and maybe get a spark on how you can make tough decisions earlier. Little known fact, I think it's some good news that came out of this episode is that we ranked this podcast. We ranked in New Zealand because of this episode, because this particular CEO is from New Zealand. And so when the episode aired, all the New Zealanders, I hope that's what they call themselves, listened, not all, but a lot of them listened, and that created a buzz, and we ranked pretty high in New Zealand. And I thought that was pretty cool because we are a global company. We started out as, local in Peachtree City in Georgia, and then we went national, and then we went global. I mean, we have people from Philippines and Hong Kong and companies in New Zealand and Australia and different places working with us. And I mean, really more than that. I'm not even naming all the countries that we have, Spain, but it feels really good. And they're learning and growing with us. And we feel like the more we can serve, and again, this episode, like last episode, 156, is part of our Search for Meaning Over Money series. And I'm replaying this one because it was just so potent. And before you hear the episode, you're going to hear me talk about our Search for Meaning Over Money masterclass for about 2 minutes. And then you're going to the episode. If you are a CEO that has a tough time listening to your team or has a tough time communicating and relating to your team, this masterclass is for you. So you should listen. Don't fast forward. And I'll tell you exactly how we can connect. So that is all for now. Listen to this episode, get out of it as much as you can, and let me know what you did get out of it. You can go ahead and email me. You can record as 1 or 2 minute recording and then email it to me and just tell me what you got out of this episode. You can email it at podcast@presidentiallifestyle.com. Everything you need will be in the show notes. So I will see you sooner. Hey guys, welcome to Presidential Experience Podcast. You're back, and this is another week of EO interviews. We have another EO member. But let me ask you a question. Before I get started on that, I really want to know, how many of you were cheerleaders when you were a kid? Or maybe you wanted to be a cheerleader? Or better yet, maybe you wanted to date a cheerleader? Because I know we have a lot of men listeners. I think everybody has a cheerleading story somewhere inside of them, even if it was just that you were a cheerleader for Halloween one year. I asked this question because our guest today, Kimberly Ramsey, a mother of 3, traded in a successful law and accounting career to start the sport of cheerleading in New Zealand. She started her business with $200, and it's grown to be a multi-million-dollar global sport, apparel, event, and tour company. Going from tax lawyer and accountant to cheerleading entrepreneur, Kimberly now runs 8 locations across New Zealand, plus a global event and apparel company. We will talk to Kimberly about her shift in her career, how she found meaning in this new business, what stressors come with running a sports business, and how she navigates working her business, being a mom, and just working it. Besides all of that, I'm really curious to know how Kimberly kind of navigates this thing between pizza, chocolate, and ice cream and mindfulness and running, because we have that in common. So I really want to know how she navigates that. So guys, please join me in welcoming our guest today, Kimberly Ramsey. Hey, Kimberly.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you're here. So I don't know if you remember this from our podcast, but we ask every guest, what is your idea of prosperity?
I think for me, prosperity looks like really good life balance, having meaning in the work that I do, but then also having that amazing family time and making the most and enjoying, every day regardless of what it brings.
I like that. Enjoying every day regardless of what it brings, right? Because we can't control that.
So it's kind of
And
like looking for the magic in every day, I guess.
yes, exactly. So speaking of that, looking for the magic in every day, how do you do that? What are some ways that you have found work for you?
For me, it's about I really like serving people and helping people and helping people improve their lives in any way, shape or form, I guess. So for right now, for me, if I can help somebody in my day, then that makes me feel good. It brings me joy to spend time with my family. I do this thing. I did a parenting course recently, an online parenting course on how to do positive parenting, and they suggest doing quality time with your kids, so 10 to 15 minutes a day. And so before my kids go off to school, we do a 15-minute, what we call quality time. I'll have one of my children and my husband takes the other one, then we switch over and we do something that they like to do. So just being able to have that really mindful, present time with them. I love starting my day that way because I feel good. That mother guilt goes away. I'm like, I've done something. It's great. We had that connection, one-on-one connection with each of the children. And then for me in my business, I coach cheerleading. So for me, it's not about just teaching cheerleading skills, but it's about teaching kids really great life skills. And in these changing times right now, the virus and things, it certainly is a trying time for everybody. But if I can, spark some magic or joy or help reframe or rewrite or look for positives for kids in this time, then for me that really, helps me find the magic and brings me joy.
Yeah, that's so good. I love how you talked about you and your husband separating the children. You get some quality time one-on-one and then shift and get quality time with the other. And even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes, that's the stuff that kids remember. They don't necessarily remember the toys or the shoes that you buy them. They remember the times that you're right there with them, giving them that love and attention. So that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, they really enjoy it. They look forward to it. They're like, is it quality time now? And we set the alarm clock, and it also helps them get ready before school. So we're not yelling and fighting. So we say, if you're not ready before 8 o'clock, you're going to miss out on your quality time. So they get themselves dressed and they do everything that they need to do. And it's little things. We play cards, or we might colour in together, or play a board game or Jenga or something. But it's just really, I love starting my day that way, and so do the kids.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant too. Because I'm a therapist and I work with teenagers a lot, especially teenage boys. And one of the biggest complaints that the parents have is them getting up in the morning. So that little trick right there, that is so cool. I think that's a great trick to put something in the beginning of the day that they really look forward to, and that'll get them out of bed. And then they can add that into their lives as they go.
Yeah, no, it does definitely start our day well. So
Yes. So how has well, I actually have two questions. So one of them is around the mother guilt. You did mention the mother guilt. And is that part of your shift? Is that part of what shifted you? Or I'm just wondering where that mother guilt was. Did you have that in your previous career? And is that kind of what got you to shift careers, or is it a different reason why you shifted careers?
Oh, yeah. So no, I shifted careers just because I wasn't passionate about being a lawyer, and I loved to be around people. And I remember talking to my law boss at the time, my partner, and I remember her asking me, what would improve this job? And I said, I'd love more people contact. And she said to me, well, then you should be the receptionist. And I went, okay, this is not for me. And that was kind of why I made that shift. And I actually really wanted to be a party planner, and because I just thought that just looked really fun and exciting. So I actually put an ad in the paper for party planning and cheerleading classes, and nobody called me for party planning, and everybody called me for cheerleading classes. So that was kind of my shift into that career. I kind of had always had a bit of an affinity for cheerleading and pom-poms. It didn't exist in New Zealand. We had Dallas Cowboy type cheerleading when I was younger, and I thought it was really glamorous, and I always really wanted to be a part of it. I tried out for the team 3 times and I didn't make it. And on the last time I went, screw this, I'll start my own team. So I did. I started my own team and put myself on it while I was at law school, and enjoyed doing that. And then when I realized that the law wasn't for me, I then moved towards, trying to create a career in cheerleading or event planning or something, and cheerleading just happened to be the way it kind of fell. So,
wow. That's really interesting because it sounded like you were open to just do something new, put some things out there, and then just by being open, the thing that was for you flourished.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we push because that could have happened, and then you could have stayed trying to push the event planning thing, even though the cheerleading was clearly taking off. Sometimes we push in the wrong direction when we have something going well over here. Instead of taking advantage and being grateful for that, our focus is on the wrong thing.
I originally started with event planning or party planning and cheerleading, and the cheerleading part of it took off. Now I find myself more in the event planning role with running events and, for cheerleading and dances all over the world. And that part of me is getting to really flourish now. So I kind of feel like, if you stick with something or you put it out into the universe, it really does deliver back to you. So I'm really quite grateful that I get to live both my passions now.
Yeah, that's so interesting that it wrapped back around that, you started with you put both out there, and then the event planning was okay, but the cheerleading took off, and then now you plan events. Are the events around cheerleading? Are they connected?
Yeah, no, they are connected to cheerleading. So the cheerleading and dance competitions that we run, and specifically we do a global one in Hawaii with teams from all over the world, but I get to kind of play around a bit more. We do like an opening ceremony and we do a luau at the end, and it's really kind of the fun part of what I get to do now.
So cheerleading is where are the events connected to cheerleading?
Yeah, so I create cheerleading and dance competitions for people, and we run those in New Zealand, Australia, and we do a global event in Hawaii, which is really cool because I get to play around with an opening ceremony. We do a big luau at the end. We do glitter cannons and lighting, and it really is just an amazing big party. So it's awesome that I get to kind of live in both worlds now.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, because it sounded like you had a passion for event planning as well as the cheerleading. So when the cheerleading takes off, it doesn't mean that your passion for event planning goes away, but it's good that it was able to just wrap back around and allow you to do both passions in one. And yeah, and tell me about event planning, because that you talk about some stress that can be very stressful, and you kind of have 2 businesses in one, the events themselves, which means there are quite a few stakeholders, and then the cheerleading. Does it feel like several businesses in one? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I'm juggling 4 businesses. We have the tuition side of our business, and then we have the event side where we run cheerleading and dance events, as well as making the merchandise, the apparel and uniforms, as well as then organising big tour groups of people, accommodation, flights, transport, and all of that as well. So it's a lot to juggle, but I really wouldn't have it any other way. I probably feel more at ease, and I feel better or more in control when things are going crazy. I'm quite good in crisis mode, and when I don't have a lot to do, it's harder to feel at peace, which seems, I know, a bit crazy. But in terms of the event side of things, I did a bit of a mindset shift for myself when I started working on a bit of personal growth. I originally thought I needed to micromanage and control things, and if it wasn't done my way, then it probably wasn't done properly. And since working on that side of myself, I now realize that to empower people, you need to let them make mistakes, and I have to be okay with mistakes, and that now when we have an event that doesn't go perfectly to plan, I actually feel like that's more successful than an event that would go really well, because as a business or as an organization or as employees, we then learn from that and we can take those learnings into other events.
Yeah. And that's so interesting that you say that about the mistakes, because this search for meaning over money project sort of came out of this idea my brother and I were talking about. When you hear about successful CEOs, all you hear about is their successes, their resumes, but you don't hear as much until they pass away. Then they tell you the whole story. They don't tell you some of the mistakes, but unless you know them intimately, you won't know that they went through that. And so it's likely that you learned from your mistakes. So it's only fair that we let our team learn from mistakes too. But as CEOs, we don't always do that. So that's interesting that you learned that and shifted that mindset. How has that relieved or even caused stress for you? How has that shifted stress for you?
Well, when I realized that things didn't have to be done my way, and that I'm actually really grateful to have staff do work for me, I completely reframed what it looked like. So when I go into an event that I haven't been involved in this setup, I tell myself before I go in, don't worry, it'll be fine. You can fix it. You didn't have to do the work. Be grateful for the fact that it's been done. So I can go in now and see, mistakes as learning opportunities. I'm so grateful for the fact that, previous to having staff, I would be doing the setup to midnight or whatever that might have been, that I can turn up the next day and most of the work be done. I'm just grateful for that opportunity that, I've been able to spend at home. So it doesn't create stress for me. It's just a gentle reminder for myself to look for the gratitude in the situation and to look for the positives rather than looking for those negatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in presidential lifestyle, we call it what's going well. So, yes, if you can look at that, what's going well. And like you said, you're grateful to even have a team, because at one point you were doing all of this. And that shift to having a team behind you, really pushing forward the things that you can't have your hands in everything. Otherwise, you won't grow.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, as you are making the shift from one business to the next, how did you learn? Because it sounded like you had a job before and then you started a business. So how did you learn the acumen, all the business stuff that's not about coaching, cheerleading, the other aspects that are more about the growth and the sustainability of the business?
I think my parents have been in business, so I've always had a business mentor or a coach or someone to talk to. I never really made any business decisions on my own without talking them through to somebody. So I think just, you don't know what you don't know. So I just went in full steam ahead without any fear or anything. So, and that's kind of really worked out well. Not knowing hasn't been a problem. I think for me, it was about being open to hearing other people's ideas and being able to talk out, problems and issues, so that I can, even just hearing myself talk it through, I can normally come up with a solution, and then backing myself rightly or wrongly, and knowing that whatever I choose or whatever decision I make will be the right one, because I'll either learn or it'll be what was supposed to be. So for me, it's always, I think, after 16 years in business, it doesn't really matter what happens. I have this overwhelming positive outlook that everything will work out, because there's never been a time that it hasn't. As bad as it can be, it still always works out.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And one of the things I heard you say was you didn't make any of the decisions by yourself. So having someone to talk to, or having someone to run things by, or like you said, just talk it through, because as you hear yourself saying it, you can say, oh, wait, that might not work. Or, oh, but what if I did it this way? So that's really good, because a lot of times people do work in silos, especially as young CEOs and entrepreneurs. We work in these silos and we try to figure it out in our heads, and we really can't do that. So having a strong business mentor is such a blessing.
Yeah, I also think that there's never any wrong decision. I think not making a decision is normally the wrong decision. So inaction is the worst decision I think you can make. So choosing to do something, whatever it might be, will end up being the right decision because you'll learn from any mistakes that you make, or you will, or it will be the right, the right call at the time. So
Yeah, so good. We interviewed another EO entrepreneur who said that similar thing, and kind of not making the decision. A lot of times people freeze and don't do anything, and that's just not the right move. You can end up going out of business, not paying attention to what else is happening. You've got to make a move, even if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you wanted it to. It's like you said, it's the right decision to make a decision. So you just make a decision and then you make that decision right along the way, because you're going to course correct as long, as you go.
Yeah, if it's wrong, then pivot. You'll learn pretty quickly that wasn't the right call, and it's okay to say, I made a mistake. I didn't know it was wrong, and I'm going to change. So I think, I'm pretty confident in the fact that I'm okay to say when I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think that's that and in front of your staff too, or whoever that might be, to say, oh, look, we made a mistake and we won't do it again, and here's why.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point you made, so that you have that humility, humble out enough to say, hey, this is what happened and I own it. And this is where we're going moving forward. That's so good. I like that.
So, yeah, I'm really big on owning your mistakes and accountability and honesty. Is the best policy. So I don't know if it's okay for me to discuss it. We just had I coached Team New Zealand for cheerleading, and we were just about to go to our World Cheerleading Championships in a few months' time, and I made the call to cancel earlier before anyone else was cancelling because of the virus, and it turned out to be the right thing. But it's tough calls that you have to make, especially in changing times when things are changing by the hour.
Yeah, that's a great point you make, because we run a virtual business already. And although we do live events a couple of times a year, for the most part, our business is pretty virtual. So we didn't have to make a call like that. But I can imagine how tough that call could be, because it affects so many people. So what was the thought process and the kind of wisdom that you had to use to get to?
So for me, I was really upfront with my family. So we had 180 people booked to travel with flights paid for. Before I paid flights, I asked the insurance company to make sure we were covered for coronavirus. They laughed at me and said, of course, there's nothing in Florida. Don't be silly. And I said, well, give it to me in writing, please. And I was lucky enough not to pay any other accommodation or things over. And I just kind of kept monitoring the situation, that old saying of, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So I was just really open with my athletes and the families that were traveling. And I said, look, I think it will be cancelled. And everyone's like, wow, this was pretty early on. And my thought process behind it is that I couldn't mentally feel like I could motivate athletes to an Olympic level of cheerleading, because it's really tough work to be, an athlete at that level. And as a coach, to motivate them to do that, when in my mind I was pretty certain the event wasn't going to go ahead when the NBA started cancelling and everyone was cancelling. So, not to mention with borders closing and all sorts of stuff, I made the call early enough to say to the families, I don't think it's prudent, and I think it would be reckless and irresponsible to take a team over to America when we don't know what's happening. So, there were lots of teams, because some athletes will never get a chance to go again. But for me, it felt like the right call, and, we got a lot of support out of it, and the kids were actually really resilient in the way that they handled it. Now the problem is, will I still have a business with schools closing, and how long will our, gyms be closed for, and how long can we last? And, we won't be holding any events, since the number is down to, I think, 100 maximum that we have in Australia, and same with New Zealand. So we're looking at not holding any event. You won't be having an event business, this year, likely. So won't be
Yeah.
selling apparel, unlikely to be doing tuition. Look, we'll definitely try to go virtual, but it really is a case of playing the long game and not the short game right now. So providing our families that are, having to be on lockdown and at home to give their kids something to do virtually, to come on Zoom and see see each other and be a part of something. And also just to, keep that community going. I know that we can't charge a lot for virtual classes, and I'm thinking we're not going to have much income at all. But, if we can keep it front and center and we do a really good job of engaging kids and families and, help ease that boredom, then when we do come back, hopefully those families will come back and support us in droves. So,
Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely.
kind of our plan.
Yeah. Because it sounds like, this too shall pass. And kind of what you said earlier, everything does work out. It usually works out. That's been the case. But you can't see that while you're in it. You know it will, but you just have to sustain, like you said, through the long game long enough to get past this obstacle, because it will pass. And on the other side, if you can just be there when it passes, then you can flourish again. And it sounds like you have an incredible business. So they'll be back. They won't leave you, because it sounds like you've done a great job of really executing on this.
Yeah, and right now for our event business, I mean, that's a biggie when you run 10 events a year and there's not going to be any. For me right now, I'm just helping support the dance schools and the gyms that sit behind those events so that they will have businesses to come back to, because without them, I don't have a business. My focus is on helping those small businesses to see the bigger picture and, sharing my knowledge on what that looks like. So, this morning I sent out a message just saying, it's changing every day. So my first message a week ago was, let's start creating virtual online content, because that's where we're all going to be. And then my next one was, I'll be careful of creating virtual and online content, because we now aren't competing with the dance school down the road or the cheerleading school. We're now competing with the best dance schools and cheerleading schools in the world. And our world's going to be flooded with virtual content. So, what we do have that's unique to us as businesses is the bond and the team aspect of what we do. So, any content we create needs to be engaged around bringing kids together in a virtual world as our teams, and I thought that might give us enough income to see us through, but there's going to be families that are struggling to get money. So my next post is actually, I don't think we will be getting a lot of income, maybe a quarter or a third of what we were getting before virtually, but everyone's going to be offering virtual. So now we just need to play that long game, and we need to keep them engaged so that when we do come back, that they're, there to support us. So, it's changing daily.
Absolutely. And great way to get ahead of that and be innovative and thinking that through, because that's what keeps you in the game, really being able to think ahead like that. So let me ask you a little bit about, so it sounds like this is a stressful time and a bunch of sacrifice is happening. How do you manage through yourself personally? So you talked about the business, but how do you yourself manage what you're going through?
Oh, look, I mean, the last week I probably sat on the bed and watched 5 different news channels just to try and keep up to date with what's happening. I guess I'm really, and I don't know how this probably sounds terrible, but I'm kind of in a guilty way enjoying the drama of it all. It's like watching a soap opera. So that's quite distracting. Knowing that I'm not going to have any income in my business, does that stress me out? No, it's not at the moment, because I think I could make it through to the end of the year and would be okay, and could kind of work with banks and, mortgages and holidays, rent holidays and all that type of thing. I'm managing the stress. Or actually, to be honest, I don't feel any stress. I don't feel anxious or stressed about it. I'm more excited about being able to help and build relationships with gyms and cheerleading and dance schools all over the world, to help them. When I feel like I'm helping them, it gives me purpose and joy. And, it's really not about the money. I think I'll come out stronger at the end of it as being able to, because I've been so helpful in sharing my thoughts and where I'm in, what I'm doing with my business is helping others, and we're creating all sorts of different content for people, virtual and online classes that we're giving away for free. That feels good. And so I really feel like I have more of a purpose now than prior to, the virus happening, because I'm way more helpful to people than I've ever been. So yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
It's really good. Yeah, I'm not anxious or stressed. I'm a little disappointed that I'm not getting to go on holiday, but apart from that, no, really looking forward to actually having family time, and forced family time will be great. So
yeah, that's a great perspective to have over it, because it sounds like because the virus came, it opened up some opportunities for you, like you said, to help other people. So it created even more meaning in what you were doing. Even if the meeting was already there, it just made it flourish and bloom even more.
It's given me an opportunity. So I created a business growth group for cheerleading and dance schools in New Zealand and Australia. And I started that in the middle of last year, just giving away free content and letting people know what I do for my business. And this has given me just another opportunity to talk to people and help them. And it really does bring me joy to get, messages to say, oh, thanks for sharing. It's really great content. I've made really good decisions because of what you've been saying. I didn't re-sign my lease. All that type of stuff just gives you, it warms my heart in a time when it feels like crisis.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm wondering, and this is just from being an athlete myself, so how do the athletes stay in shape during this season?
So we'll be doing, cheerleading's one of those team type aspect things where we do like lifts and pyramids, which we obviously can't do, but, we'll be creating fitness classes and strength classes and all sorts of things. And the kids can join us on Zoom with a live instructor, and we can, talk to them and chat, and then give them challenges and stuff to do, and take kind of virtual, fitness classes really is what we're planning on doing, as well as, technique classes too. Yeah,
that makes sense. So I'm going to shift a little bit in a strange direction, because you talked about in our pre-conversation, pizza and chocolate, two of my favorite things. So I'm wondering, when does pizza and chocolate come in? Like, when do you see yourself having more pizza and chocolate than maybe you should? And how do you balance that mindfulness and the running with the passion you have for pizza and chocolate?
So I think last week or the week before, when things got really crazy with the virus, I spent a week of eating carbohydrates and comfort eating, which is terrible. And then went and sugar, and just went, okay, that's enough of that, sat maybe comfort eating, watching the soap opera play out. And then this week I went, that's enough, get off your butt. So, I have been running and exercising at the gym, which, brings me great. You just feel better when you're exercising. And I think the mindfulness is hard to, fit in at the moment with everything that's kind of going on. Yeah, I don't know. It's all a bit kind of hectic at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Like, many people turn to carbohydrates when they are stressed. And one of the things that we do here at Presidential Lifestyle is we monitor stress, but we do that through physical activity, nutrition, and sleep. And I know that whenever I'm talking to a patient, if their nutrition is starting to slip, or if their physical activity is starting to slip, then I know that the stress is to come. Or if the stress comes, they're not going to be able to handle it. But it's funny how this all related, because if you're not getting enough sleep, you're going to crave carbohydrates, which just means that your body is like, well, hey, I need more energy. And then you start to eat the carbohydrates, but then that means you don't want to go to the gym, or you don't want to walk, or you start doing things that are less physical, and it all connected. And then the stress comes, and now you're not prepared for the stress, And your reactions to things mentally and emotionally are so much different just because your regimen is out of whack. But
Yeah,
on the
it's a pretty
yeah,
vicious cycle, isn't it? So
it is.
I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
If you're going into isolation or lockdown, or your routine changes so dramatically
Mhm.
and you want to reach for comfort food, and what tips or tricks can you do to not do that?
So one of the things that I recommend is having some of it. Like, don't eliminate. And that's what a lot of people, they want to starve themselves or eliminate or like try to use this willpower to not do it. And so that, just stop that first. Like, give yourself permission to have some carbohydrates, especially knowing that you're experiencing a short crisis. This will end, this will pass, right? So just give yourself permission and then decide how much that is. So what is that? That might be a bowl. Okay, I'll have one bowl once a week or twice a week, whatever the number is for you, where that guilt doesn't set in. And then, speaking of the guilt, you just have to tell yourself, when you do begin to feel guilty, say, actually, this is not a bad thing. I already told myself that I was going to be able to have 2 bowls of ice cream a week, or I was already told myself I was going to be able to have pizza once a week. I did that. It's once a week. I'm good. So you just talk yourself through it as you go and give yourself permission to have a little bit more than you normally would. And then the second part of that is you really have to pour in a lot more good. So that means you're eating a lot more vegetables, a lot more kale, a lot more broccoli, or
Yeah, okay.
you're like, yeah, like overdo it on that side. You're like really pouring in on that side. And then that helps you because the more good you put in, you're just not really even going to have room for the other stuff. But those two, if you can balance those two, those are simple ways to make small, like a small dent in that. And then the last way is the meditation or the mindfulness, because I meditate twice a day, and I recommend to my patients to meditate twice a day. Once a day is good. If you're not meditating at all, then at least try that. But if you're meditating,
How long do you meditate for?
20 minutes,
Wow,
20
okay.
minutes both times. So I don't do long meditations because one, I'm running a business, and an hour meditation just is not really conducive. But when they did the studies, studies showed that 20 minutes of meditation is really all the brain needs. Once the brain has that 20 minutes of meditation, it is the equivalent of 2 hours of rest.
And what does
So
meditation look like for you? What does 20 minutes look like?
meditation for me and for what I teach is it's just quiet. You don't really need any music, but if you want that, sure, turn music on for yourself. But you really don't need any music. You just go within. I do mantra meditation. You have a mantra, and let's just say, for just example purposes, that this mantra is thank you. So we'll say thank you, thank you, thank you. You repeat the mantra and repeat the mantra. You slow down eventually. Thank you, thank you. And as you slow it down, also getting lower and lower and lower. And now you're saying this in your head. So when you say lower, you actually can lower the sound in your brain. And
Yeah.
as you lower the sound in your brain, then what will happen is you'll begin to go into thought, which is fine. It's okay. People think that you're not supposed to think in meditation, but the brain is very powerful. We're not going to stop the brain from doing what it already does. We're not stopping the heart from beating. We're not stopping the stomach from digesting. So we're not stopping the lungs from breathing. So we're not going to stop the brain from thinking. Let it do what it does. So just allow it to think. And eventually you're going to get lost in thought. As you get lost in thought, then your brain will go silent. But the reason why you don't get lost in thought is because you keep stopping yourself from thinking. No, don't focus on that. Focus on silence. It's like, what? Focus on silence? What the heck is that? So your brain starts to think, and it's fighting against itself. But if you just let it do it, then you'll get lost in thought, and then it'll go into silence. And it won't last very long because the brain can't do that for very long. So the body is going to have some sort of jerk, and then the brain is going to be like, what was that? And so then you just repeat that same cycle again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. After 20 minutes, and you'll just have a little clock, and you can see when the 20 minutes come. You just look at the clock and you see the 20 minutes, and then you're done. And you just sit there for another minute, just allowing your brain to come back. your body and brain to like really connect to the room. Because if you go into deep meditation, then you probably kind of got lost you get kind of like woozy, like you don't want to just stand right up after meditation. So you give yourself a second to just come back into the room. And then once that happens, once you are able to do that, it gives you a little bit more control. I'm going to use the word over yourself or your emotions, a little bit more management, because even control is a tough word, and it is tough to have control, but it gives you some management over yourself. And you'll be surprised how much you change by just doing those 2 meditations a day.
Wow. That's awesome. Thank you. I always thought I had to make my mind go silent, and it's just so hard. I'm like, I just can't do it.
No, nobody can. And then probably, okay, some monk that has been meditating since he was 5 or something, but that's not, we don't need to do that. As a regular person with day-to-day activity and responsibilities, monks don't have responsibilities. That's why they're able to.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. So that's kind of what happens, is that people have this misconception of what meditation is. And then they're just like, you know what? Never mind. That's too much. I'm not going to be able to do it. And so once you simplify it a little bit and know that it's natural and your thoughts are okay. And let me add this, sit comfortably. Don't think you have to prop yourself up on a meditation cushion, or you can just chill in your favorite comfy couch or lazy boy chair, wherever you like. You don't have to be sitting on a rock in some remote area to meditate.
I love that.
Yeah. So that kind of brings us, I have one more question for you, but I'm wondering, I know this is a time of change, and at the time this airs, we don't know where the coronavirus will be. It might be long gone, because we're going to air it sometime later. So
I think it's going to be here for the next 6 months.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm absolutely, I'm happy to talk about no virus, but yeah.
So I'm wondering how people connect with you if they say, wow, and we have listeners all over because it's the podcast, it's global. And they say, wow, I didn't know that was here, or wow, I've been thinking about doing that. Maybe I should call them or contact them. How do people connect with you? Or even during this virus, they just might want to be connected. So when this is over, that they'll be connected with you. So how do people connect with you?
Oh, yeah. So if anyone wants to connect with us and you're in New Zealand and you want to do cheerleading, you can call 0800 cheerleader, or you can find us on our website, www.allstarcheersport.nz. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram on Kimberly Ramsey, or if you're looking for really any cool dance and cheerleading events, we are at cheerbrands.com. That's cheerbrands with a Z.com.
Cheer Brands with a Z. All right. And I'll make sure I get all that info from Kimberly and put that in the show notes for you guys. So don't worry if you didn't have time to write all of that down. It'll be in the show notes. And just to wrap up with our last question, tell me, what is the best advice you've ever received, or the advice you wish somebody would have told you?
I think the best advice I ever received, and it's kind of a mantra that my family lives by, is that where there is a will, there is a way. So to never give up, the best ability is availability. So if there's something you really want, or there's something you want to do, there'll always be a way to do it. And it just takes perseverance. And sometimes it looks a bit like, looking outside the box and being a bit creative in the way that you get there. So I always wanted to be a cheerleader. I wasn't good enough to make the team, so I started my own and put myself on it. So, yeah. So where there's a will, there's a way is probably my, best thing. Don't give up. Just keep trying.
I love that you said, you know what? Don't worry about putting me on your team. I want to create a team, and then I'll beat you. I just added that part. That was the little competitive girl in me. Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. So really just sharing that the pivot that you guys have made, because I know so many people experiencing this can learn from your words, your experience, and also your temperament, because you're not going through this yelling and screaming and reacting. You're going through this calm and peaceful and pretty responsive and innovative. So I really commend you in how you approach this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think there's no point in being, that stressful feeling isn't helpful. That anxious feeling that, doesn't help solve any problems or get you any further. And it's that power of now, that meditation that you talk about, accepting what is and then looking for the positives and a way forward in a way that you can help other people. It's really what's kind of seen me through this. And I just see amazing opportunities rather than, problems.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. Well, thank you guys for listening all the way to the end. We're so glad you were here, and we want you to come back next week. We're going to be doing more EO interviews. We have some mini courses coming up for you too, and we actually are starting a new series, and it's going to be on Fridays. So you're going to have 2 episodes a week. How cool is that? I know. Don't. You're excited. I know. Calm down. It'll be fine. I can't wait to see you guys either. So have a great rest of your week. Thank you, my Pros Pros. Thanks for listening all the way to the end, my Prosperity Pro. I want to stay connected with you. Here are 4 ways. Pick the one that works best for you if you want to stay connected with me. 1, if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Send them to podcast@presidentiallifestyle.com. I'd love it if you would make a 1 or 2 minute audio message and attach it to an email. That'd be the easiest way for me to get it. Ask me anything about creating a life of meaning over money, and I'll get you an answer. Remember, the email address is podcast@presidentiallifestyle.com. 2, subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends, because you guys might want to have a discussion about it, especially if they're a CEO who wants to shift from the old American dream to a life of meaning. 3, we try not to have any sponsors on this show unless they are truly in line with our values. I mean, really a good fit. So that means we fund this podcast ourselves. I'd like you to take a look at our resource page to see if there's any products or services that we recommend that are right for you. If not, no worries, maybe later. If so, please use our affiliate link to purchase. Thank you in advance for doing that. You are such an amazing person. Okay, 4 and last. If you want to know what's happening over here at Presidential Lifestyle and you want us to email you the update, then go to presidentiallifestyle.com/blog/now. And you'll see the current updated blog for the week, but you'll also see a link to subscribe to that blog. We can email it to you if you like. That's presidentiallifestyle.com/blog/now. Don't worry, you don't have to remember that link or any links. They're all in the show notes. Oh, and I forgot to say, if you're enjoying this podcast, go ahead and leave us a review and tell us how much you're enjoying it. And now for the legalese. This podcast is not to replace professional counsel. The best advice is from a professional who knows you and your specific situation. The topics discussed in this podcast are general in nature and for informational or entertainment purposes only. We encourage you to meet with a professional that you can discuss your specific situation with. Whether you choose us or someone else, one-on-one counsel is important, whether it's a financial, therapeutic, legal, or other decision. So that's all for now. I'll see you next episode. And remember, You can have wealth in all of its forms. Believe it, and you'll soon see.